All right, well, thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Heather Knoll, and I am the program coordinator at Sustainable Woodstock. Founded in 2009, Sustainable Woodstock is a not-for-profit community and environmental action and education organization. And we exist to lead our communities through the climate emergency, empowering Woodstock and the rest of the Upper Valley to meet climate commitments and live sustainably through advocacy, education, and collaboration. And this event is a part of our Green Drinks series, and Green Drinks are social events to connect people and organizations who have similar interests in sustainability and climate change. And now I am excited to introduce you to our speaker tonight. Elizabeth Rondinone is the conservation coordinator with Farm and Wilderness. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Heather. Do you want to share my screen? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Like Heather said, my name is Elizabeth. I'm the conservation coordinator for Farm and Wilderness Conservation. Thank you again, Sustainable Woodstock, for hosting us and providing this space for us to share our story and our work with all of you, and also the ways that you can get involved. Sure, I can get to the next slide. Okay. All right. So a brief introduction to Farm and Wilderness Conservation, and then we'll get into some details a little bit later. We are a registered nonprofit conservation organization. We manage and steward over 5,000 acres of land, primarily in Plymouth and Mount Holly, Vermont. Much of the land in our care is permanently conserved, and we focus on land and water stewardship, conservation, and recreation. And that can be kind of broken down into three different buckets: land, water, and people. We work with our partner organization, Farm and Wilderness Foundation, and their well-known summer camps. And Farm and Wilderness Foundation is rooted in a long history of careful land stewardship, conservation, and recreation. So I'll just do a brief introduction into Farm and Wilderness Foundation. So the roots of Farm and Wilderness Conservation reach back to the 1930s and the visionary founders of Farm and Wilderness Summer Camps, Ken and Susan Webb. The Webb started with a little more than 100 acres on the shores of Woodward Reservoir in Plymouth, and an initial summer camp enrollment of about 28 campers. That was in 1939. Today, Farm and Wilderness summer camps are accredited by the American Camp Association, and each summer we welcome over 100 summer staff and over 750 campers from all over the country, ages 5 to 17. We currently have 5 separate summer camp offerings for folks, each with a different focus, serving the needs and varied interests of children and teens of various ages. 4 of the camps, so the Barn Day Camp, Timber Lake, Tamarack Farm, and Firefly Song, those dot the eastern shore of Woodward Reservoir in Plymouth, and then about 12 miles south, we have Saltash Mountain Camp, which is located on the shore of Lake Nineveh in Mount Holly, Vermont. All of the camps continue to follow the Webb's mission to connect people with nature through cooperation and respect for the natural world and the environment and for each other. We're guided by our mission, which is joyful play, purposeful work, rugged outdoor living, and our grounding beliefs that our camps and conservation efforts teach timeless skills and kindle the spirit within. Here are some photos from some camp times. It's almost that time of year again. And along with taking part in activity areas such as art and carpentry, outdoor living skills, and waterfront, the campers have a chance to work alongside our farm director on our organic farm, growing greens that they eat in the dining halls, collecting eggs, taking care of our herd of grazing animals, and learning about sustainable farming practices. And so our farm, our pasture and farmland consists of about 20 acres on our property. Right. So before we talk about farm and wilderness conservation today, I just want to give you a little context and history of our organization and the various iterations. So as I mentioned before, Ken and Susan Webb opened the first 3 farm and wilderness camps in Plymouth in the 1930s. And by 1960, the camps were thriving. The Webbs were eager to establish new camps, but finding the open land for that wasn't easy. Fields and forests were disappearing as development kind of spread through the Plymouth Valley and in Route 100. And when a 310-acre wooded tract on the eastern side of Lake Nineveh came up for sale in Mount Holly, the Webbs, as well as some farm and wilderness supporters, seized the opportunity and bought it. And a few years later, they formed a formal group called the Wilderness Corporation to focus exclusively on conserving Lake Nineveh and the land around it. And they eventually built other camps in that area. And over the next 30 years, the Wilderness Corporation acquired more and more land, eventually protecting almost 3,000 acres surrounding Lake Nineveh. In 1995, when the corporation directors decided that a nonprofit conservation organization could advance their purpose more effectively, they disbanded the Wilderness Corporation and formed the Nineveh Foundation in 1996 to carry on that work and that legacy. So there's a picture of Lake Nineveh if you're not familiar with it. And public grants and private donations helped the Nineveh Foundation maintain and expand the Wilderness Corporation's kind of focus and legacy, protecting wildlife habitat and promoting nature-friendly recreation. During their time, the Nineveh Foundation obtained 3 conservation easements to permanently conserve the majority of their land. And as a result of these efforts, they helped complete an environmentally critical wildlife corridor and bear corridor, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They also did a lot of water quality maintenance and monitoring, restoration for Lake Nineveh. They hired scuba divers and trained lake monitors to completely contain and remove Eurasian water milfoil from the lake, which is a really big achievement. And so now we're kind of more in present day. So in 2018, the Nineveh Foundation officially affiliated with Farm and Wilderness Foundation to share professional services and staffing and to ensure the long-term sustainability of its work. And in April 2022, it was announced that all of the conserved lands and work completed by the affiliation, would be known as Farm and Wilderness Conservation. And so here we are today in 2025, still carrying on that work and that legacy. And we do a lot of different things, but I'm going to focus on a few of our areas of work today in this presentation. We'll talk about our land, trails, and some projects we've been working on. We'll also dive into community engagement and ways that folks like you can get involved with either volunteer opportunities or seasonal paid positions. And then I'll also highlight some projects that we're excited about for the coming years. All right, so got some maps here. Hopefully you can see them okay on your screens. So today we continue the legacy of land conservation and stewardship, first established by the Webbs and then the Wilderness Corporation and eventually the Nineveh Foundation. Currently, we own and steward over 5,000 acres of land, most of which is on this map here on the right, either in Plymouth or Mount Holly, Vermont. And of those 5,000 acres, over 50% are permanently conserved in the Federal Forest Legacy Program. We also have some of that land enrolled in the Vermont Current Use or Use Value Appraisal Program. I'm going to briefly talk about those two programs, but I encourage you, if you're interested in more details about each of those, to look into that on your own. So the Forest Legacy Program, you can see the logo at the bottom of the slide. It's a federal grant program to protect forest lands from conversion to non-forest uses. And it protects ecologically significant forests from fragmentation and development while also allowing things like hunting and fishing and timber harvesting and public recreation. The program is voluntary. You need to enroll and have your application accepted. And if you get approved, the landowner sells the development rights, but the land remains in private ownership and is open, in our case, is open to public use in some locations. If the land changes ownership, it remains permanently conserved, so it can't change status. And to stay eligible for the program, you must have a forest management plan and comply with regular inspections associated with the conservation easement that goes along with this program. Briefly, I'll talk about conservation easements. So it's a legal agreement that a willing property owner makes to restrict the type and amount of development that may take place on their land. The conservation easement is either donated to, purchased by the organization holding the easement. Some land uses are prohibited and others aren't, but the landowner retains the title and all remaining land rights. Currently, Vermont has about 79,000 acres that have been conserved through the Federal Forest Legacy Program. And there's about 56 or so conservation easements through the Forest Legacy. Farm and Wilderness Conservation has 6 of those. And we are in the process of applying for 2 more, which we're really excited about, and I'll talk about in a moment. The other program I mentioned is Current Use or Use Value Appraisal. That is a little more manageable for private landowners. And that is a tax benefit to the landowner if they keep their land in current use, which is defined as productive farm and forest land. The land enrolled in current use must be managed productively, and they need to have a management plan that includes timber harvesting. This is a kind of newer program. It was implemented in 1978 by the Vermont legislature, and it enables farm and forest landowners who practice long-term management of their land to have their land appraised for its use value rather than the fair market value. So it's a tax benefit for those doing that important work. I want to orient you to this map here. It's a tiny bit outdated, but can you all see my cursor? Okay, so this is Route 100 here in Plymouth, if you're familiar. And this is Woodward Reservoir, and so we call this section Woodward area. It's about 600 acres there. That's where 4 of our summer camps are located. And 444 of the acres in that parcel are enrolled in the Forest Legacy Program. And then the Nineveh area, so there's Lake Nineveh, that is 3,955 acres, and 75% of that is enrolled in the Forest Legacy Program. And an exciting update is that this polygon, little donut hole, we actually own now and are in the process of conserving to create a connected forest block. All right. And I want us to just take a moment to step back and think about, kind of put on a more regional landscape lens, think about the context a little bit. Um, these maps are really helpful at looking at how our conserved lands fit in the landscape matrix of state and national forest, as well as other privately conserved lands. So the map on the left, you can see everything in green is permanently conserved, and the farm and wilderness properties are these black hatch marks. Um, and then the other one um, is a similar map, and it's the emphasis is on Green Mountain Bear Corridor. So using the state and national forest as well as our land to create this habitat connectivity, important for movement and migration of plants and animals and birds. Um, a lot of people in the conservation world talk about contiguous forest blocks or habitat connectivity, and that's all really important when we take a step back and look at our impact on the regional ecology. These are some of my favorite maps that we have. Just step back for a moment. All right. So I mentioned we have a lot of land, and so on that land we have a lot of different habitats, different forest types and tree types, different natural communities and wetlands, varying topography. And we keep all of that in mind when we manage and steward our land. We've had much of it surveyed by a professional botanist to monitor rare and endangered species and to map things like vernal pools and delineate different kinds of wetlands. And that's all been really valuable for us. Um, in addition, we've over the years built 10 rustic three-sided shelters. You can see here in the picture on the right, as well as we have about 20 miles of hiking trails, many of which are open to the public for use, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, hiking, all those things. And the campers, farm and wilderness summer campers, have access to all this land. They go on trips to the shelters, they do hiking trips, our staff do training at these sites. So it's all shared, and it's all really important resources for our community. All right, so in addition to, dealing with the easements and managing the land, we also do a fair bit of programming during the summer with farm and wilderness summer camps. Campers have access to the forest and land and resources stewarded by Farm and Wilderness Conservation. But we also work directly with camps to provide environmental education, service work opportunities, and for campers to connect with each other and the land. And this includes things like hikes and canoe rides, fun, engaging activities, trail work, invasive species removal. And at our teen camp, we have something where there's a program specifically dedicated to ecology and conservation. Teens get grounded in a sense of place of the local area. They go on field trips and get to dig into kind of bigger picture themes and concepts. So some of these photos are from last year. This one on the left, the campers are doing sit spots where they observe their surroundings and do a drawing or take notes on what they notice. They helped install a kiosk at one of our trails. They were really into invasive species removal. We got some trail work. This was a really fun activity where campers got to inoculate maple logs with shiitake mushroom spores to then grow to eat as an edible food source. This photo, campers are meeting with one of the loon biologists from the Vermont Center for Eco Studies to learn about their programs and the importance of removing lead from fishing tackle. We also do a lot of programming with the littler kids at the barn day camp, so leaf rubbing. This is an activity where we took them to our milkweed patch and they looked for milkweed caterpillars, their little magnifying glasses. And then this one is a kiddie pool sized beaver dam. So they got to make their own beaver dam and learn about why beavers are a keystone species for wetlands and habitat creation. So lots of fun things going on in the summer. Um, Another thing that we do is we partner with two local school districts and their existing after-school programs to visit 8 different schools each month, reaching around 100 students, ages kindergarten through 6th grade. We provide environmental ed and sustainable farming programs to inspire the next generation of land stewards, basically. Programming topics have included like the wild world of animal sounds, meeting our goats, vernal pools, winter twigs, learning about animal tracks, pressing cider, and meeting our rabbits. Most recently, we brought animal skulls and animal pelts that we borrowed from Fish and Wildlife to the schools, and the students really enjoyed seeing those. All right, another project that we fund and manage is the Public Access Greeter Program. That is a state program and it helps prevent the spread of aquatic invasive plants and animals between Vermont and other regional waterways and water bodies. They call it the Clean Drain Dry Initiative or Clean Boats, Clean Waters. So it's encouraging boaters to clean their materials when traveling in between different bodies of water. That's primarily how these aquatic invasive plants and animals are spreading. Greeters are stationed at different boat launches throughout the state, and they provide courtesy boat checks to all kinds of boats and paddle boards and kayaks, as well as just educating the general public about the threat of aquatic invasives and how they can get involved. Farm and Wilderness Conservation funds and manages the programs at Woodward Reservoir and Lake Nineveh, and we receive grant funding from the state of Vermont to do those programs. This past summer, our greeters checked over 2,660 boats entering and leaving the water at the 2 public access areas. And the greeters not only help remind the lake visitors to keep their boats clean, but they also, like I said, provide educational materials and teach people about the known distribution of these aquatic invasive species throughout the Northeast. They also collect really important data about the spread and movement and introduction of these invasives throughout Vermont. And each season, we hire a team of local community members to make up our greeter program team. So let me know if you have any interest in learning more about that position this year or in future years. The photos, this is the Lake Nineveh boat launch. So if there's a greeter there, there usually will be a sign that says greeter on duty. And they'll chat with you before you enter. And then this is a picture from 2020. Of our greeter team at Woodward Reservoir on the job. Another way you can get involved is by attending our community events. We feel it's important as a conservation organization to provide free educational and recreational opportunities to the public. Each year we host a wide variety of community building events that help people of all ages connect with each other and the natural world. In the past, we've hosted community hikes and snowshoes. Last year, we did a dragonfly survey with our friends from Black River Action Team. We do canoe rides and paddles. We also do invasive species pulls to help manage over 25 species of invasive plants on our lands. And this past year, we had a really exciting event. You can see in the top left here. We collaborated with Vermont Natural Resource Council and the Connecticut River Conservancy for an event called Removing Old Dams to Improve Flood Resiliency. The participants learned about dam removal initiatives in New England and then hiked to Farm and Wilderness Conservation's dam removal and restoration site, which I'll talk about in a moment. We also host a variety of virtual events to broaden our reach even further. We bring in local experts, ecologists, biologists. Recent ones we've had have included Vermont loons with Eric Hansen, vernal pools with Steve Facio, bogs and fens with Liz Thompson, rare plants with state botanist Grace Glenn, and most recently we had a discussion with Ethan Tapper about his new book, How to Love a Forest. And so these are just some photos from our in-person events. Lots of different things for ways for people to get involved in all seasons. All right. Oops. Yeah. Another way to get involved is through our volunteer opportunities, whether it be trail work, invasive species management, and sometimes we have tree planting and restoration projects we need help with. And we can always use the help, so reach out if you're interested. In this photo here, one of our board members is helping remove a huge patch of invasive garlic mustard on our conserved land. And this is the after picture after it had all been removed. I forgot to take a before picture. And then we also do some tree planting where volunteers and local community members can get involved with those kinds of things as well. One of our most recent and exciting projects I want to highlight is the Rockefeller Dam removal. It's been a long-term project, many, many years in the making, and I'll give you a little background. If you haven't ever been to the site, the pictures probably aren't very helpful in orienting you, but just bear with me. So the Rockefeller Dam was the former site of Peggy's Pond, and you can see in this winter photo here, the pond is being drained, but you can get a sense of where it was. It was built by the previous landowner during the conservation pond era of the 1970s. Over the years, the dam's structural integrity posed major safety hazards as well as numerous ecological concerns. So in 2016, we began the long-term removal process that required a wide array of permits and surveys and site visits from a variety of different people. And at long last, in 2024, August 2024, it was finally removed by a team of local contractors. And you can see picture on the bottom left here. They're working hard. The crews, they breached the embankment and then carefully reconnected the stream that flows toward Woodward Reservoir. Metal pipes and supporting infrastructure that were in the earthen embankment were removed, and the earthen materials that were distributed throughout the site kind of remain in the area. So the dam, the location of the materials just migrated a little bit. Once it was all completed, so you can kind of see the middle picture here, once the water was gone and all that, we planted native plant seed from Vermont Wetland Supply and planted over 550 native trees and shrubs at the site. You can see some local community members helping out last November. Additional plantings are going to be taking place in this spring. So we're going to keep monitoring the site and planting things as needed to restore it back to its original wetland habitat, to the best of our knowledge, before the dam was constructed. Um, there's substantial ecological benefits of removing this dam. Those include increased aquatic organism passage from the wetland complex to Woodward Reservoir, establishment of a 3.5-acre floodplain, sediment retention, improve water quality, minimize flood risk, and hopefully the return of native brook trout and beavers to this wetland complex. So we're so thrilled that this is nearing completion, and we really are looking forward to monitoring it in the years to come. And if any of you want to come up and check it out, you're welcome to at any time, or you can let me know and I can bring you up there to see what it's looking like. It's a few moments to talk about some of our upcoming projects that we're looking forward to in the coming years. So as I just mentioned, more restoration, planting, and maintenance at the former site of the Rockefeller Dam. We also have 2 new forest legacy applications. One is 99 acres and the other is 194 acres, both in the Nineveh area. We're also working with some community members who requested a trail that to go around Lake Nineveh. So we're working with a local trail design company on this new rustic trail that will be open to the public and just provide another opportunity for recreation and engagement. And then the last thing is we have a lot of invasive species, as I alluded to. And one experiment that we're working on is working with our grazing animals, so our goats and sheep and alpacas, to help manage these invasive species, including Japanese knotweed and some porcelain berry patches. And we've had some pretty good success with that so far. They don't seem to mind it too much, so we're excited to keep experimenting with that as some sustainable management practices. All right, so yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and engagement. And then thank you again, Heather and Ginevra from Sustainable Woodstock. If any of the things I talked about, folks are interested in taking part, so community events, paid positions, volunteer opportunities, can reach out directly to me. My email is there and also my phone number. And I'll pass it back to Heather and Ginevra to answer questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So we're going to go ahead and take questions. We're going to do it a couple different ways. If you're comfortable being in the recording asking your question, then I can unmute you. And what I'd ask is that you use the raise your hand button, which if you haven't used it before, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on React, and raise hand is right there. And if you would prefer not to be on the recording, you are more than welcome to put a question in the chat and I can read it. And to use the chat, again, you go to the bottom of the Zoom screen, click on chat, and it should pop up on the side there.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for going through all of that. It's like a lot to capture, but I think you did it really well. And I'm just going to start because this was kind of on my mind as you were talking. You mentioned vernal pools. You talked about like the restoration of that dam area. I'm curious if there are spots on the property that feel like very special ecologically to you all. Maybe those are the vernal pools, or maybe there's an area where some of the trees are a lot older. Just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would say spots where there's wetlands, especially we have a place on Woodward Reservoir. It's a class 2 wetland and class 2 protected natural community. It's the floating bog, which some of you might be familiar with. That's a really special and rare spot that and no one really owns it because it's in the lake, but we are very protective of it and care a lot about its future. So that's one spot we really like. Again, vernal pools are really important. And I don't believe we have any quote unquote old growth forest because it's not a very common feature in the landscape right now. But I would say wetlands are really important, and just places that are undisturbed, that provide really great habitat for plants and animals are really important. But all of it is important.
I'll have to go there. I
Yeah,
haven't been to the floating bog.
yeah, definitely.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Does anyone have one? And if you're having trouble, oh, here's Todd. So you should be able to unmute yourself, Todd.
Hello, folks. Todd Manise. I live in Plymouth, opposite corner, work in the Vermont Rivers program. I don't know if you saw in my chat, the floating bog is very cool. I learned very young as a kid, you can't step on it, won't hold you up. And a lot of fond memories. I never went to farm wilderness camps, but what is the fall end of the season circuit?
Oh, the fair.
The fair. Thank you.
Mhm.
Went to that as with my sisters and parents as a kid, and that was very fun. The Rockefeller Dam Peggy's Pond project. Very. I'm. I've got two screens going here. I should move this over to my so that you see me. Anyway, so the dam removal project was very important. Vermont has now had 74 removed, 74 dams removed since 2004. So I'm giving a plug for Peggy's Pond Dam removal, Rockefeller Dam removal. And if anybody knows of any, there's innumerable in Vermont, and there's a lot of reasons to take them out. And if anybody's interested, you can find my state email address on the Rivers webpage. I'm in the um, floodplain protection river corridor section. I don't recognize any of these names. Maybe I didn't meet you in the Irene aftermath 15 years ago, 14 years ago. And if you have any questions, if you have a pond or you know anybody that does own a pond, I've got a very, I didn't prepare it. 2017 is the date on this. Reasons to remove dams. And there's one image of a dam on stream and another off stream. And then the list of benefits, adverse impacts and benefits for removal. So I remember when I first went up with farm and wilderness folks to that dam site. It was full, and then it was drained. And that same year, maybe 2 or 3 months later, I was back. This is so cool. The sediment that comes down and drops out behind the dam because the water movement is slow also the water carries sediment, debris, and seeds, native seed stock. So it's in a low oxygen environment underneath the water column. And when the water is drained out, it pulls oxygen in the seeds sprout in like 2 weeks, and you see these little green things, and it's like it's remarkable. It's like a month, and it's like, wow, it's getting really green. I can't see much brown. By the end of the summer, when I saw it, I've got a picture, but I'm not going to look for it to share with you. I sent it to Jay Coleman that it is stunningly gorgeous. And there's not anybody that doesn't go, wow, that is unbelievable. So thank you for F&W for taking that out, and thank you for the opportunity to plug dam removals. And again, you can find my contact information on the Rivers webpage.
Todd, if you want to put your contact into the chat in case anyone
Oh,
wants to reach out about their
I'm
pond.
sorry. Duh.
Don't be sorry.
Good idea. I'll do that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. That was great.
All right, so we have a question from Freda. I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Hi, I'll apologize first because um, I was late to the meeting. So I don't know if this was covered, but I was out there pulling invasives. Um, when I first registered for this, um, and I saw farm and wilderness, I thought it was going to be about how farmers can participate in saving some wilderness. So, but what I did catch was really, really inspiring. Um, but I wonder, I mean, if this is kind of totally out of your purview, then just dismiss the question. But I wondered, I'm I have uh, an old farm. It's not working anymore in upstate New York. And I actually do have a wetland thanks to beavers moving in. But along with a wetland also comes some invasives starting to push out all the wonderful, native plants that first sprang up. And I've worked for many years trying to get government programs to help because the wetland got large enough to be on on the maps even. And I think it's a wonderful area for wildlife and wildflowers and everything as you pointed out. But I wonder if you can advise as to what organizations might be out there, or other government programs I might not know about that aren't on the state level that would help farmers who want to enhance um, natural areas that aren't going to be farmed anymore. That we want to preserve them as natural areas, especially for when it involves water.
Yeah, those are great questions, and great you're thinking about all those different interconnected things. Did you say you're in New York or in Vermont?
Oh,
Maybe you can't unmute any longer.
yeah, there we go. Now you should be able to.
Uh, I'm in New York.
New York, okay. So I'm not 100% sure how things work in New York regarding this, but I would say talking with your county forester is a great start. They can come, at least in Vermont, they can come to your property and help give you suggestions about how to manage. If you're asking specifically about invasive species, there's lots of great resources online about identification and some experiments and best practices as to how to at least prevent them from spreading. It's hard to completely eradicate invasive species, especially if they're well established. But there's ways to at least prevent them from spreading to future locations. So I would say contact your county forester and then also look into invasive species management for the specific ones that you're referring to. Does that answer your question?
I'm going to throw in NRCS, even
Mhm.
though the federal government is in a difficult position right now in terms of funding, and some farmers are losing NRCS grants. But your New York State should have Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and sometimes they have invasive species grants just to.
Actually, I've done all, I've already investigated those. I I'm very educated as to recognizing invasive species.
Awesome.
Um, I, you know, I'm in upstate New York. I take all kinds of programs at Cornell to learn and belong to a native plant society. So, always learning. But unfortunately, NRCS and those kinds of programs are generally, even though the biologists were really, really interested and really excited, um, the grants only go to certain places and they usually go to working farms that cover much more acreage. Um, and I know a lot about invasive species control. I've done the research, but unfortunately, in a wetland, it, when you're dealing with things like canary reed grass and other really really aggressive plants, um, I'm not I'm not qualified nor comfortable applying herbicides. You need a special license working in wetlands. Wetlands are very important to the water supply. So, it becomes onerous to someone who needs to really hire people um, to do these things. And, you know, if, if you can't afford that kind of investment, it's just heartbreaking to see good land and good potential not, you know, deteriorate rather than. Also, I'm 73, by the way. So, I do everything I can, but, you things wear out.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing your best, and humans are still trying to figure out invasive species, and how we respond to them. And so it's still kind of a learning process. And at what point do you let it go? And um, you know, you have priorities of a different nature. It's all kind of a big question, but I do understand your concern, and I can follow up with some possible resources for you. It's a little tricky because you're in New York and it's a kind of different way things are organized, but I really appreciate you bringing it up and that you're aware of it and talking about these things. It's great.
No, all right. I'll just mention again, while you all are thinking, that our next Green Drinks event, it will be a virtual amphibian crossing training on April 10th at 6 p.m. and should be a really fun event. We'll also have a recording of it if you want to sign up, but can't make the actual the training on that night. And I'm going to put that into the chat again in case you'd like to sign up to join us. And looks like we got all of our questions answered. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Oh,
It was so much fun to learn about all of that, and I can't wait to visit.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Reach out if you have follow-up questions or if you want to get involved or go on a hike or come visit. We're always happy to bring folks around. So thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.